Hey folks, welcome back to another video, and this one's a bit of a special. As we're off on our family holiday, we've left you with a bit of a rundown of what we've done so far this year, how our challenge is going, and some of the highlight birds. But first, I take a little trip out to look for another target species. Yes, before you get to see some footage of some real mega rare birds and our highlight species of the year, and see if it looks like we might hit our target or not, I go looking for another target species. One that's not particularly rare and we saw a lot in Lesvos, but in the UK appears to have eluded me so far. So after 2 failed attempts, I head to the banks of the River Mersey in the hope that it may be third time lucky. Hey folks, I'm at Halehead Lighthouse. I'm here to try and find a specific species that we've not seen in the UK yet this year, the yellow wagtail. I've seen reports over the last few weeks of them showing up here, and I've been twice and not found them. So this is kind of third time lucky. I hope. Stick with me, let's find out. On the long lane down to the lighthouse, I was greeted by a large flock of starlings. They initially flew into the hedges by the side of the path, and as I walked up they flew off and eventually landed on the lighthouse itself. Arriving at the lighthouse, there's a path that goes in each direction along the banks of the Mersey. I took the path to the left with the sea on my right, and a cornfield that had recently been harvested on my left. On the shoreline there was a few birds, including a family of shelduck, and also quite a number of oyster catchers. The cornfield on my right was really difficult to scan, as I was up against some pretty serious heat haze. I did spot in the distance a small bird hopping about which appeared to be a skylark. The one species I heard a lot of, and that came to the edges of the field near the path giving me good views, were goldfinch. There were some young birds and also some stunning looking adult birds too. As I turned round and walked back towards the lighthouse, I spotted a wagtail. But this was a pied wagtail, not my target species. No yellow wagtails in this direction. As my confidence started to diminish, I heard an encouraging sound. So folks, a bit of an update. I've heard a yellow wagtail and I think I've seen one, but it was really distant. It was over on the beach, so like the sun's a bit against me. I'm going to try and get a different angle, see if I can find one. They're here somewhere. The silhouetted bird that made the sound like the yellow wagtail was seen briefly on a little sandstone outcrop, so I stood by the lighthouse and watched it in the hope that the bird may return. There were a few other birds coming here to feed, including groups of linnets. Eventually though, I saw a bird that looked to me like a young yellow wagtail. Unfortunately though, it was a little distant, so couldn't confirm it. So I climbed down on the beach in the hope that I might get a slightly better view. And this kind of paid off, as I soon had a view, albeit through heat haze, of a yellow wagtail. And then another one which looked like a youngster walking around on the beach feeding. I watched both the bird on the beach and the one on the rocks for quite a while, until a wood pigeon flew in and spooked them and they flew off. As much as I got my target species, I was really hoping for better views, so was kind of cursing the wood pigeon. I did stick around on the beach hoping for the yellow wagtail to return, but after 10 or 15 minutes, they didn't. So I headed back to have another walk along the path. Seeing en route in one of the bushes a lovely linnet that was very confiding. And further up the path in the distance, more wood pigeons, possibly friends with the one that had spoiled my fun. At this point I sat on a bench to call Kaylee to tell her I'd got my target species, when I looked to one side and there was a bird walking towards me on the path. When I got it in the camera, it was another yellow wagtail. As soon as it saw me though, it walked off into the distance quickly and then flew off onto the beach. Encouraged by this, I followed in the same direction, passing the starling-filled lighthouse and back down onto the sand in the hope that I might get some better footage without any wood pigeons getting in the way. Once I was on the beach, I got a little bit closer to the rocks, but in a position that was a little bit hidden, attempting not to spook any of the birds that come down to feed. The first customer wasn't a yellow wagtail, that was a goldfinch, but soon my target species arrived. Initially it was quite distant, but
Whilst I waited, it started to come closer and closer, giving me fantastic views of this young yellow wagtail. This lovely species is a summer visitor to the UK, breeding here then moving south to winter in Africa. Although not particularly rare in Britain, the numbers of this species are rapidly declining, and the yellow wagtail is now on the red list. So I was over the moon to get such good views of this young individual before it makes its first migration.
Hey folks, third time lucky. That was hard work. It took a lot of wandering around, looking at birds against the sun, but got it in the end, and that's another one for the year list. Excellent.
Now, back to our challenge and how it's progressing. Well, we started the year with quite a hefty target, 275 species. Before we get into the numbers, let's look back at some of the rarest birds we've seen this year so far, and there are some real megas. Our first mega rare bird and lifer of 2025 was a rare American wading bird, and the world's smallest shorebird, the least sandpiper. This diminutive little wader showed up in Somerset in January, and was a great way to start off this year's rarity hunting. We picked up our second big rarity and lifer on a trip to Northumberland. This, another transatlantic visitor, was the American pipit. Getting to the bird involved quite a few miles of walking, but was well worth it, as when we found it, it gave us excellent views, and one of my highlights of the year so far. On the same trip we got another mega and lifer as well in the shape of a black scoter, but the footage was so bad I'm not putting it in the video. Now onto a rarity that isn't a lifer for either of us, but a species I've never had footage of, the black-throated thrush. This individual spent quite a few days in a garden in Hampshire, even chasing the local blackbirds off. This was a real stunner. Now closer to home, an RSPB Conwy here in North Wales, and yet another American visitor. This was a Bonaparte gull. This tiny gull gave me a bit of a run around, flying from one side of the estuary to the other. Luckily, in the end it landed on one of the pools on the reserve, and although only stayed there briefly, gave me great views while it did stick around. The next rarity and lifer came in the shape of another wading bird. This time a western sandpiper, a real mega. This meant us travelling up to the west coast of Scotland. Luckily, this long journey was worthwhile, and after a bit of a search and help from another birder, we tracked this fantastic shorebird down. The next species, although not a mega rarity or indeed a lifer, was a real favourite of mine, and Kaylee's favourite bird, the woodchat shrike. And this individual showed up quite close to home, on the outskirts of Runcorn. Not only that, it was incredibly confiding, quite often coming pretty close. Although Kaylee did get to see it once, I visited the bird 3 times, and was the last person to report it on bird guides before it moved on. Now to Yorkshire, and a very brief sighting, but an excellent bird nevertheless. This wonderful ortolan bunting spent quite a while at Wycombe Forest, and was thought to have paired up with a yellowhammer. Although quite elusive, we did get a couple of brief views of this wonderful bunting. Now, onto a species that was a highlight for Kaylee, and another trip to East Chevington in Northumberland. After seeing reports of a marsh warbler, we travelled up in the hope that it was still there, a bird that we thought we'd seen in the past, but weren't certain enough to count it. This individual, though, left us with no doubts. When we arrived in the evening, it was sat on top of the reed bed, singing its heart out. This bird put on a great show, and it was a great decision to come here, as the following morning it had left. Our next rarity is another wader, and another visitor from America. This individual showed up on the south coast at Pennington Marshes. This is a lesser yellowlegs. Although a species we have seen before, where one spent months at Frampton Marsh in Lincolnshire, one we hadn't got on this year's list. And with some help from another birder, we tracked this one down, which gave us reasonably good views in very windy conditions. On to our next rarity, and our most recent one, and also a lifer. This is a white-winged tern, which was at East Chevington in Northumberland, somewhere we've been a few times this year for birds. This time, it was a mad rush to get there before it went dark. When we arrived, it was late in the evening and the sun was beginning to set over the pool. Regardless of this, our haste to arrive had really paid off. The following morning, the bird had moved on. There were some birds, although not mega rare, which were highlights for other reasons, and were particularly memorable. Like actually getting a good view of a ringneck duck for Kaylee to see, this one being on the outskirts of St Helens. Another was getting fantastic views of our first male black redstart in the UK, and this one was particularly showy on the Great Orme in North Wales. A trip to Yorkshire broke the curse of the water pipit, and we finally got one of these on film. This one was riding one of the filters at a sewage works. A genuine highlight close to home was getting views of a goshawk, a species that's not easy to see at the best of times. The next was particularly exciting, although a reasonably common bird in the southeast of the country, not so common where we live, and has eluded my camera up until this year, the wonderful green woodpecker. A trip to the border between East Sussex and Kent gave us wonderful views of a purple heron, a bird before the journey we weren't expecting to see, so that was a lovely surprise. Moving now into Norfolk and an RSPB reserve we'd never visited before, RSPB Lakenheath, gave us some fantastic views of hobbies. There were multiple birds here giving an amazing show, and we really rated this reserve. Remaining in Norfolk and a windy beach at Snettisham produced a fantastic view of a turtle dove. This species we'd only ever really seen before on telegraph wires or a little distant, so this one being so close was a real privilege to see. I should mention also an extremely controversial species, the Alexandrine parakeet. I visited the outskirts of Sheffield to see what could be the only breeding colony of this species in the UK. I do feel like this is a very brief list, and there were many more fantastic birds and experiences we've had this year. It's been quite a ride. But now, we have to have a look how we're doing on our 275 bird challenge, how close we are, and if we think we might reach that lofty target. So, with the help of that wonderful yellow wagtail earlier in the video, that's helped lift our total up to 238 species. Although that sounds good, is it? Well, this time last year we were on 223. That means we've seen an additional 15 birds. Now, I thought I'd make a comparison with fellow bird tuber and friend Dutch birder. Check out his channel because he's been doing a similar challenge to us over in the Netherlands. But he's actually beating us, now being on 253 species, which is commendable. And there's nothing like a little friendly rivalry. But now back to our 275 bird challenge, and with our current figure being 238 species, we have about 5 months to find 37 more. Although that sounds easy, it's not, as we've ticked off a majority of our British birds. So we're relying on the few British birds we've not seen yet, and rarities. This is where we hope for a really good autumn migration, and the birds show up when I'm not working. I don't know if you recall from the start of the year when we outlined our challenge, one of Kaylee's aims was to be in the top 10 on eBird for the UK. Well, let's give you an update on that. We are currently, on the date of me recording this, at number 11 in the UK on eBird, which is higher than we ended last year. Let's hope we can sneak into the top 10 before the end of the year. Well, thanks so much for watching this video, and we really hope you enjoyed the update. Please like, please subscribe, and please press that notification bell, and we'll see you on the next adventure.